Today on Hearts of Heroes, a New York City apartment fire, a heart-stopping rescue.
Me and Nate got into action and said, we have to go over and get this person.
And 2 precious lives at risk.
And I just started yelling, we're coming, and help's on the way.
Plus, a flash flood calls for a daring water rescue.
They had sheer terror, completely afraid that they were going to die.
The drive to save, that's a first responder for you. Of all the rescues firefighters perform, few are more daring or dangerous than a rope rescue.
And they are relatively rare, but firefighters are trained and ready if and when a rope rescue is necessary.
New York City, AKA the Big Apple. It's famous for so many things. Among them, Broadway, Wall Street, and of course, the soaring skyscrapers. But the true spirit of the city lies in the people, especially the brave men and women who serve them. And no one exemplifies that spirit like the members of the New York City Fire Department.
My favorite part of the job is the people that we work with, just the salt of the earth. Those that choose a life of service. I don't think there's anything better than that. And I believe we have the most dedicated workforce in the city of New York.
While each firefighter has their own personal reasons for joining the department, it mostly boils down to duty and honor.
Being a firefighter for me is just being someone who's works hard, trains hard, dedicates himself for the service in New York City.
What got me interested in being a firefighter was the events of 9/11, just inspired by the guys who was running in while everybody else was going the other way. And that probably inspired me and thousands of other New York City firefighters.
For these brave men and women, there's a sense of commitment, but also a sense of pride to work with this prestigious fire department.
We're the best trained, best equipped fire department, I would argue, in the world, quite frankly.
Part of that training is learning how to do a rope rescue. They barely ever use them, but they are an essential skill since the city is known for its multi-story buildings.
It's very, very rare, but it's one of those evolutions that we practice so much because you have to get it right every time. It's a serious, life-threatening situation for the firefighters doing it.
While most firefighters will never have to perform this dangerous maneuver, they all train for it weekly.
In this type of rescue, a special rappelling rope is attached to a secure object. The other end of the rope is clipped onto a harness worn by the firefighter. As the rescuer descends down the building, a fellow firefighter raises and lowers the rope as needed.
This training was put to the test one early morning in September of 2020. Firefighter Jairo Sosa had been working more than 20 hours when he was dispatched to a 2-alarm apartment fire in the Washington Heights neighborhood.
When we arrived, we saw fire blowing out of the windows on the 5th floor of a 6-story building, and we saw people trapped on the floor above the fire, yelling for help and screaming for help.
The fire was cutting off the fire escape for people that were above the fire. If you were above the fire, you had no way to get down.
Our safety concern was that these people may jump or may collapse because of the smoke or the fire inhalation. So we knew we had very little time just to get to them and get them out safely.
Firefighter Sosa immediately went to a position on the roof.
Responsibilities of a roof man involve being able to do a perimeter around the roof, make sure that nobody's hanging out a window, and making sure we open what we call the bulkhead at the roof, where we open the door and relieve pressure from the smoke.
He made his way to the roof and got to work.
I opened the bulkhead and a heavy amount of smoke came out of the bulkhead to the top floor. After that, I heard somebody yelling and screaming at the top of their lungs, and that's when I went to action to try to find that person.
Sosa raced around the perimeter of the building, unable to find the people that were calling for help. Just then, firefighter Abraham Miller showed up.
We could hear it sounded like a child was screaming also. So we just looked at each other like, oh, we gotta find this person. Somebody's trapped.
They're trying to get water on the fire, but there are multiple people trapped.
With no time to lose, they split up to try to find the trapped victims.
And I just happened to look over the side of the building, And through the smoke, I just saw like a little person's hands out the window. We thought it was a baby, and I called Sosa over. I was like, yo, I think we got a baby out the window.
Inside the apartment, a grandmother and her 4-year-old granddaughter were desperately trying to escape the smoke and flames.
We were like, is that really what we're seeing? We had to double check with ourselves, and we said, yes, it's like a little baby is gonna be pushed out of the window.
So often, firefighters are put in a position where they have to make split-second, life or death decisions. These two brave heroes knew what they had to do.
In this situation, a rope rescue was the only option because there were so many companies already overextended to rescue the other people that were there.
But despite their training, neither man had ever performed an actual rope rescue.
Me and Nate got into action and said, we have to go over and get this person before they succumb to the smoke or fire.
Coming up, firefighters put their lives at risk to save a little girl.
We just decided we have to go over. We have to go over the roof to get them.
And later, a flash flood pulls a family into the rapids.
I don't know if you've ever seen terror on somebody's face, but they had sheer terror.
But first, the safety tip.
Did you know cooking causes over 172,000 structure fires every year? Luckily, there's some simple ways to avoid kitchen fires in your home.
Be sure to keep the area around your stove clear of anything flammable, and never leave your stove unattended while cooking. Keep an extinguisher nearby in case you run into trouble.
Remember, fires can happen fast, so stay alert, stay safe, and be prepared.
It was early morning of September 29, 2020. New York City firefighters Jairo Sosa and Abraham Miller were responding to a fire in a 6-story apartment building. As they rushed to the roof, they heard the cries of a woman and a young child trapped inside.
At that point, me and him started searching, and we found little hands pushing out of a window on the top floor.
While neither firefighter had ever performed this highly dangerous rope rescue, they both knew what had to be done.
We just decided we have to go over. We have to go over the roof to get them, especially considering that it was a child. That just sent us into another gear. We're going, we gotta go.
Fortunately, both men had rope rescue training. Now, they would have to put that training to use.
But as they clipped the rope onto Miller's harness, they then realized there was nothing to secure the other end of the rope to.
The biggest concern is you gotta find a substantial object, something to tie off on, something that's not gonna move, that's gonna hold your weight and the weight of the victim you're rescuing.
Unfortunately, I couldn't find anything to tie off to. I had to tie off to myself.
He laid on his back and put his feet up and used his weight and braced himself up against a heavy pipe, and he held the weight that way.
With only the weight of Sosa's body as a brace, Miller began lowering himself down to the trapped people.
I just started yelling down to the girl and her grandmother, like, we're coming, help's on the way.
When he reached them, he saw there was a child guard blocking the window.
I pulled on it, I just go forward, I push on it, I just go backwards. I'm like back and forth trying to get this child guard out of the window.
Heavy smoke in the window, I'm getting through the child gate.
He made the decision to bust out the glass above the child guard.
I wrapped my left hand inside of the window, and I just used my right hand to start punching the window. I was just yelling at them, get back, give me the baby, get back.
With the glass removed, he was able to pull the 4-year-old right out.
When I finally had her in my arms, I just squeezed her tight and was like, put your arms around me.
Instinctively, the little girl knew she was safe.
Craziest thing is she was crying the entire time. But once I had her in my arms, I said, you're all right. I got you, put your arms around my neck. She stopped crying.
I got the baby out the window.
Miller whisked the little girl away to a safe area, then handed her off to a medic.
That might as well have been my own kid at that point. You know, that's how we are, especially when it's a child involved. We operate as if it's one of our own.
Moments later, Miller was right back fighting the fire.
Even though he had just performed a dangerous rescue, this brave firefighter knew his job was not over until the fire was out and everyone was safely out of the building.
Soon after the little girl was out, firefighters were able to get to the grandmother and lead her to safety as well.
We were able to rescue the child. We rescued 14 people from that fire that day in many different locations of that building. So it was a very successful rescue in all aspects.
Out of the smoke and debris, a special bond was formed that day.
The girl drew a picture. She had a little smoke coming out the windows. She drew her and me. It was like, I was in tears when I first got that.
To one little girl, this firefighter was a true hero. But Miller knows he's just one of thousands of heroes in the New York City Fire Department.
It was a pretty dangerous situation, but that's just what we do. If it wasn't me, it would have been somebody else. It's 11,000 more people in the fire department that would have lined up to do the same thing I did.
Coming up, a family is caught in a raging flash flood.
My concern was that the current of the water was actually going to flip the truck over.
Often in a rescue, multiple agencies are called in to save those whose lives are in peril, from police to fire to EMTs.
And in the flood rescue you're about to see, it took an army of first responders from different places all over, including some utility workers, all of them together to get a family rescued out of the water.
Right in the heart of Tennessee lies the pastoral county of DeKalb. With a population of only 20,000, it's home to wide open farmland, babbling creeks, and gorgeous billowing hillsides. Most of the folks here have called this area home for generations.
We're a rural county. We have a population of about 20,000 people. We have some industry here and a lot of agriculture.
A lot of rolling hills and a lot of small towns with rivers and creeks running in between, so it's kind of a mix of everything.
While the landscape is breathtaking, it can also turn disastrous when heavy rains hit.
Due to the terrain, we have a lot of hills on the outside of our city and the towns around us that the creeks running through the towns usually get out of the banks in big rains and usually flood areas around the creek, so we get a lot of water rescues.
Lebanon, just outside of DeKalb County, is one of a few fire departments trained in swiftwater rescue.
We pride ourselves on training, so once you're hired, they'll start sending you to all the different classes, the specialized training, and they'll send all of us to go get swiftwater trained.
When water rescues are needed, smaller departments, like neighboring DeKalb County, rely on Lebanon's specialized experience. Which is what happened on February 28, 2021. Strong storms hit DeKalb County and rivers and creeks began to overflow.
We have a lot of steep terrain, and when we do get a flash flood, the watershed just accumulates into those small creeks and they become swollen really quickly.
That afternoon, a truck carrying 5 people, including a mother, a father, and their infant, tried crossing a flooded bridge. In just moments, their vehicle was swept off the road into the rising water.
That water wasn't but 6 to 8 inches deep, and it took a half-ton truck full of with 5 occupants and moved it like it was nothing.
People often think that a submerged roadway is safe to drive over, but then they find themselves in peril.
Anytime you see any water on the roadway, try to avoid it because you don't know the depth or if there's sinkholes underneath the road. Just a small amount of water, 3-4 inches, can move a vehicle if the water's moving fast enough.
Shortly after the truck went into the flooded creek, Fire Chief Donnie Green got word from 911.
I got to the scene and I saw the pickup truck, I saw the people inside, I saw the infant that was being held by the mother and the passenger side of the truck.
Chief Green recognized this was a very dangerous situation.
My concern was that the current of the water was actually going to flip the truck over and we were going to be into a more critical situation than we were already in.
Chief Green began calling in swiftwater rescue from around the county, including the team from Lebanon. But the clock was ticking.
We had all those people en route, but we knew that we had a real situation there that we might not be able to wait for an hour or so for those teams to get assembled and to drive to our location.
Desperation forced him to think outside the box, so he called the telephone and electric companies to help.
The DeKalb Telephone Cooperative showed up. They have a bucket truck with a boom that we were going to use to extend out to the area where the truck was because the water was simply too swift.
But the arm of the bucket was too short to reach them, and time was running out.
Anytime that water temperature is going to be 60 degrees or less, you start seeing the effects of hypothermia. Also, just the fact of the vehicle overturning, not being able to secure the occupants, especially the infant, and them becoming swept away in the swift water. We had to consider all that.
Coming up, a water rescue puts first responders in jeopardy.
Could have been catastrophic for us. It could have sucked us down.
But first, another safety tip.
Did you know that standing water after a flood can be just as dangerous as the flood itself?
Flood water can contain contaminants and even conduct electricity. This is why it's so important to be aware of the hidden dangers.
When it comes to floodwaters, stay out to stay safe.
In February of 2021, a pickup truck carrying 5 people, including an 18-month-old baby, was swept into the current of a flash flood. As first responders waited for the swiftwater rescue teams to arrive, the DeKalb County Fire Chief called in every available resource, including 2 utility companies. But as water filled the truck cab, the family was growing more frantic.
They were pretty emotional from the get-go, and it didn't get much better to start with as this procedure was going on. They realized how dire the situation was when we were having to continue to bring in additional resources.
Fortunately, the swiftwater rescue team from Lebanon was already on their way.
While we were en route, dispatch told us that they requested us to step it up, so that's kind of when it clicked that this was something serious going on, and we needed to be ready for it.
When we pull up, it's kind of mind-boggling. There was probably 150 vehicles up and down the road, bystanders standing everywhere. There were several other departments there running around, trying to figure out what was going on.
Water was moving pretty quick, and the truck was unstable. You could see it moving a little bit with the water, so we knew time was of the essence, knowing that I had a small kid and we needed to do the best we could to get him out.
By this time, the family had already spent a dangerous amount of time in the frigid water.
The water was still very cold, and those people had been sitting in that water for probably an hour and a half. So hypothermia was a big concern. The water was still rising. That was another big concern.
The team came up with a plan. Paddle a raft out to the truck with 4 rescuers on board. Then they could pull the family out 2 at a time.
We knew going in that we had a 6-person boat and we had 4 rescuers, so we can't overload our boat. We can only grab 2 patients at a time.
Meanwhile, they set up additional responders on both sides of the creek.
The guys that did have training in swiftwater, they were our rope guys to be able to throw ropes to us downstream if something did happen and we did end up in the water. Then we also had paramedics, them in certain positions, make us easier to paddle to them downstream where we could drop them off and hand over care to them.
But when they boarded the raft, things took a frightening turn.
It didn't go quite as planned. As soon as we took off, we got sucked right into that Lowhead Dam.
Our plan was to go downstream and paddle back up, but the Lowhead Dam caught us and drug us in.
Which could have been catastrophic for us. It could have sucked us down if it would have been any worse. But it worked out in our favor. It shot us straight into the back of the truck, and we was able to get a hold of the truck and maneuver our way around to the driver's side of the vehicle.
Whenever you get one out, take them to the orange vest.
Once at the vehicle, they could see that the passengers were in a clear state of panic.
I don't know if you've ever seen terror on somebody's face, but they had sheer terror, completely afraid that they were going to die.
Any normal person would in that situation, especially they had water coming up to their chest in the vehicle.
The rescuers reassured them and then pulled the mother and baby first into the raft and got them to dry land.
EMS was waiting on the side, so of course we transferred care to them and they handled the medical situations.
With the mother and baby safe, they made 2 more trips to get everyone else. Beyond grateful to the men who had pulled them to safety, all 5 people in the truck knew that they were lucky.
They were ecstatic to be out of the water. They were still obviously shooken, but they were definitely happy to be out of that situation and safe on dry land.
And how great is this? After seeing the successful rescue, DeKalb Fire Chief Donnie Green approached the local county commission.
Within a month from the date of this event, we had funding established to establish our own swiftwater rescue team. That is in place right now.
And it was all thanks to a group of brave heroes from multiple agencies working together as one.
The rescue went really good. There was no hiccups. Everybody knew their job when we got in the water.
It was definitely a team effort, and that was pretty thrilling to see a group of emergency responders come together and work so well together.
You've probably heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a child.
And as we learned today, it can also take a whole team of brave heroes to save the life of a child. We are so grateful that you were here watching, and we'll see you next time on Hearts of Heroes.